Hey guys, welcome to Short Why Shy Why for this week. Thanks for joining me. Today I want to start a bit of a series of Why Shy Whys that specifically focuses on the role of the Scrum Master or an Agile coach, if you will, within the team. Now, today's episode is specifically around how a Scrum Master is not necessarily a master of Scrum. And what I would do is give you a couple of tips as to how to transform from a Scrum Master, which may mean that you've got some certification and training, to a Master of Scrum, which means that you're actually enacting and living and breathing the role of the Scrum Master. Okay, cool. So what does it take to go from a Scrum Master to a Master of Scrum? Well, a lot. Okay, what I'd like to do is draw upon the analogy of law, right? We talk often about the spirit of law and the letter of the law and how those two things are very different. And really that's what we talk about when we're talking about pretty much anything a little bit more prescriptive. And Scrum as a framework fits into that, right? So when you implement Scrum prescriptively, it's very different from living and breathing and enacting Scrum in a way that it's in the spirit of Scrum. And that's kind of one of the things that you would see anyone. In fact, there are very few truths when it comes to Scrum because every Scrum team is different. But I guarantee you, it doesn't matter who it is, what Scrum team it was worldwide, anyone who has been around a Scrum team will have one final truth, and that is that a Scrum Master is very different from Master of Scrum. Okay, so today I want to give you guys a few tips, but I want to start from the start. I want to give you an understanding of why this has come to be. And it all starts with this, not the mobile phone, but what I'm holding in my hand at the moment, a digital copy of course, is the Scrum Guide. And I'd like to read to you guys the idea, the role behind the Scrum Master. Okay, here we go. The Scrum Master is responsible for ensuring Scrum is understood and enacted. Scrum Masters do this by ensuring that the Scrum team adheres to Scrum theory, practices, and rules. The Scrum Master is a servant leader for the Scrum team. The Scrum Master helps those outside the Scrum team understand which of their interactions with the Scrum teams are helpful and which of the interactions are not. The Scrum Master helps everyone change these interactions to maximize the value created by the Scrum team. That's what we're talking about. It's specifically vague. Now, it goes into talking about how the Scrum Master liaises with the product owner, then how the Scrum Master works with the development team, and then finally, if I can get to the next page, how the Scrum Master works with the greater organization. But what you see in the language, even in those three sections, is quite vague. And it's vague specifically. And the reason for it is because of that idea we were talking about before. We're really trying to enact on the spirit of Scrum, not necessarily on the prescription of the letter of Scrum. And that's where I think there is a huge divide between someone who's done a Scrum Master certification, for example, and someone who's been in Scrum and worked with Scrum as a Scrum Master for a long time. Now, I don't necessarily devalue certification. I think there's a really great place for it in our society, in teams of Scrum and other. But at the same time, I feel like that we may be overemphasizing its value for the things that aren't necessarily that valuable, right? So here's something that I want to talk to you guys about. Let me give you the 3 tips. The first tip is that you've got to remember that Scrum as a set of processes or as a framework is in itself just guidance, right? It is called a framework for a reason, and it allows you to structure your thoughts and it allows you to structure your actions, but you should not be hiding behind those processes. You shouldn't be hiding behind those the artifacts and the ceremonies. This is not a case where when you enact the letter of Scrum, you have overwhelmingly succeeded in the transformation to Scrum. The second tip I want to talk to you about is that idea of servant leadership. Okay, now this is interesting. I've had many conversations because I'm kind of I'm a sucker for leadership theory. I'll tell you straight away. And it started way back when I was studying for business, and I read an author by the name of Daniel Goleman, and he really sort of started emphasizing what leaders are and how they work. And Up till then, up till Daniel Goleman's articles, a lot of people thought that leadership was something that was innate and you were born with it. After his research and his articles, you started to realize that actually a lot of this stuff is stuff you can learn, right? What I'm trying to get through to you here, guys, is that when it comes to leadership, not just a servant leadership, but any kind of leadership, you've got to look internally first, right? For any opportunity or any challenge that you come across as a Scrum Master, the first and only, no, not only, the first thing that should cross your mind and the first thing that you should be working on is, hey, what do I need to do? How do I mold myself? How do I put myself in a particular perspective, in a state of being, if you will, to be able to overcome or get through or capitalize on this event, right? It's always going to be about you. I know leadership really sounds about, it's a lot of people think it's about the people you lead, and to a certain extent it is, but you don't get there until you lead yourself, until you have a lot of emotional intelligence, which is what Daniel Goleman talks about. And it's until you have that emotional intelligence, you basically have no idea how to lead somebody else, right? Servant leadership takes that to the next level. It takes you to like a fifth generation leader, which is also something that Goleman talks about, where you know yourself very well. And it's until you as a Scrum Master can realize how you work, where your gaps in your skills are, all those sort of things. Everything else doesn't matter. It's that simple. You may be able to run ceremonies, run your Scrum stand-ups. You may be able to, clip a backlog like no other professional in the world, but I guarantee you're not a Scrum Master until you know yourself. Tip number 2. The last tip, and I alluded to this before, is to be a brilliant Scrum Master, you have to lead a life of inquisitivity, right? You need to be always asking why. Not just why of people, but again, of yourself. I tried this thing, it didn't work. Why? I tried this thing, it did work. Why? It's not just because you failed that you should be asking yourself why, but you should also understand the successes came for a particular reason. A set of finite variables led to that success. That experiment you ran in your brain with your team and it resulted in a positive outcome is because you had thought about something. So go back, retrospectively think about what did you do, why did you do it that way, and come up with the reason why, because then rinse and repeat. You can continue to do that. You can get yourself into a continual improvement journey where you become better at being yourself, which I know sounds weird, but it's true, and also therefore become better at being a leader and therefore a Scrum Master. All right, guys, I'll leave it to you. Leave it there, but hang out for the next 2 episodes. We're also talking about how Scrum, what the Scrum Master role can be outside of the Scrum Guide. Cheers, have a good day.